سڵاو خوێنکانی بەڕێز ئەم کاتان باش ئەمڕۆ باسێکی لە سیستەمە گریگەکانی دەشەکەین کە ئەویش بریتە لە ڕینال فیزیۆلۆجی و باسی سترەکچەر و پێکاتەکانی ئەم سیستەمە ئەکەین و باسی ڕۆڵی ئەم سیستەمە ئەکەین لە ڕێخستنی فەرمانەکانی خۆی و کاریگەری لەسەر سیستەمەکانی. The urinary system is made as I'm quite sure you have like a bit of information about this system in general. يعني هو معلوماتي عندك معلومات عن السيستم هي بدل نهائية ولا ماكو بيرخصنا وياك. So the urinary system is consisting of what? What we have here, we have two kidneys, each located at each side of the body. We have right and left kidney. Then what we have two urethras. So they are extended from where they are extended from the kidney toward the urinary bladder. This one extended from the left side of the left kidney to the urinary bladder, and this one is extended from where? From the right kidney to the urinary bladder. Then what we have here, this is the structure is called the urinary bladder, urinary bladder. And then what we have, there is another structure which is called urethra. So urethra is a shaded canal between the urinary and reproductive system. I think we mentioned this when we had our lecture about the reproductive system, okay? Male and female reproductive system, if you remember. Again, we time because you could my urethra check kind of the many كوندامي زاوزة كوندامي ميزروا شين هاو باشا وأمش ويكلا زماني كودي بيوت ميزران يعني urinary blood. So the formation of urine is the function of the kidneys. يعني رزبوني ويز لكدلو سبيت لا kidney كانا. Okay, we will explain this in detail. And the rest of the system is responsible for elimination of the urine. So the ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra are involved with what? With the elimination of. The most important part of the urinary system is the nephrons and the blood vessels. Okay, so the kidneys, it means the right and left kidneys, receive about 25% of the cardiac output. So I am quite sure you know what you meant by the cardiac output, because when we took had our lecture about the blood pressure, we explained the cardiac output in detail. Okay, so about a massive amount, 25% of the cardiac output is passing through the kidney to be filtered. يعني تقريبا لصدا بالسوبينجي cardiac output بناو قوشي لكان تيبا ريبو أو filtration بو بكري. So blood enter the kidneys or enter each kidney via or through a renal artery, then it divided into this structure which is called the efferent artery. Okay, we have this is called the efferent arterial. Okay, so the efferent arterial deliver blood to the globular capillaries. In شيكات deliver يعني بهوي efferent arterial لا فين قاتي ناو أو capillary كلا ناو بومانس كبسولان وهوي filtration blood road. Then what we have at first, or what we said we have afferent arterial, glomerular capillary. We have a network of capillary within the Bowman's capsule, and this is a site where the process of filtration can happen. Then they merge to form another artery, which is called the efferent artery. Efferent arterial. So the efferent arterioles drain the blood from the glomerular capillary. So يعني efferent arterial blood دكيو رجلت لا أمنيتم أم شبكة لا capillary كنا بومانس كبسولة ويك جرين همويان capillary كان شدرو سكن they merge to form what the efferent arteriole, and then the efferent arteriole deliver the blood to the peritubular capillaries. So this is peritubular capillary. This is a renal tubule. The structure is the renal tubule, and these capillaries are called the peritubular capillaries, and they have a role in the process of urine formation. We will explain this later. Okay. They form what? They form a peritubular capillaries. Then the peritubular capillaries, this network of capillary, they merge to form what? To form a vein or a venule, which is or what's called by a venule or a small vein, and then finally the venules are merging, or they combine to form what? To form the renal vein. Okay, the renal vein which drains the blood from the kidneys toward the vascular system, toward the heart. Okay. يعني بكردي شي مان هي كم جار artery مان هي بيوتي شي بيوتي renal artery جورترين لدرجة دابت شي بيت interlobular artery والlobular artery شي جوسكات أم جرينتين يعني كشكات afferent arteriole afferent. Then the efferent arteriole is divided to form a glomerular capillary, a network which is network of capillary شبكة capillary دروسة باللي ودواء وشيكات أمان يكجرنا ودوبارة شي دروسة كان efferent arteriole دروسة كان كبلد لم network capillary كان أول كبسولة عيوار أجريت وإجازته بكوي ودوبارة لبري أوي بيبقى vein بيتو بشي دوباره بيتو capillary. يعني شي مان هي arteriole, capillary, arteriole, then capillary again. This is a, let us say, specific arrangement of the vascular system. And شكل تايبتا بونتو artery كتبي بيبقى capillary دواي أو artery إنجا بيتو capillary. So أمريكا دروسة بيبيوتيشي peritubular. يعني بدوري tubula كاني كدنيان كparticle تشيل نيفرون. We will explain this later in detail. دواء أول شيء كان capillary كان كجرين بو شيء جوز كان بو أوي venule small vein جوز كان ودواء أول كجرين بو شيء بو حويان كو أبنوا interlobular vein كان كو أبنوا شيء جوز كان renal vein جوز كان ودواء أول blood أجهزته بشو filtered blood أو فديك blood filtration بو أكياوا إكاتو بنا شيء بو ناو circulatory system. Okay. Then what we have let us say the most important unit in the kidney is a structure or structures which are called the nephrons. So the nephrons are the functional units of the kidneys. Functional units of the kidneys are recognized as the nephrons. Each kidney contains approximately about 1 million nephrons. So each يعني هني كلا قرشلا كان شيء تيايا يعني بوحدي إيش كدني سلكي قرشلا بريتيل شيء بتيل نيفرون. أم structure بي أو تيل شيء بي أو تيل نيفرون. هموي بي أو تيل شيء نيفرون. وهر قرشلا يك بنزيكي 1 مليون نيفرون تيايا 1 مليون لأم structure عني تيايا. So each nephron is made of different parts. يعني هر نفرونك دچن partic دروست بچن بشكي هي. The first one is called the renal corpuscle. Am بشا PO3 renal corpuscle. أما أني بومانس كبسول يعني renal corpuscle am بشا كني PO3 renal corpuscle, which is the site where the blood plasma is filtered. So we have a network of capillary within the renal capsule. So the process of plasma or blood filtration is happen in this part of the kidney. So it's a site where the process of filtration can happen. So consisting of globular capillary network and network capillary. This is a globular capillary network and which is surrounded by the Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule and renal corpuscle. So renal corpuscle is made of a network of capillary or globular capillary and the Bowman's capsule. Capillary. Then what we have, the second structure of the nephron is the renal tubule. This is all, this elongated tube is the structure of, or it is called the renal tubule. Renal tubule. Okay. So the renal tubule is made of a single epithelial layer that process the filtrate to urine through process of reabsorption and excretion. We will explain these processes one by one, okay? So the renal tubule is made of a single epithelial layer. يعني إذا شيء دروس بوا layer لا epithelium دروست بوا. And you know what is the advantage of having a single epithelial layer. So when you have a single epithelial layer, so the process of reabsorption and secretion can happen in let us say in an efficient way. يعني اگر تو یک خانه هبو يعني یک single epithelial layer که تبوه capillary وایانش چون اولا یک endothelial layer یک دروز بو ام چی بو يعني epithelial layer ليك single layer دروز بو كوا اكا بآساني ماده كان هم reabsorption يعني بو بكتيا وهم حكي ماده يتريشيه كبكت بود بيستري بكت درويلش او كاتب بآساني سكريشني بو اكري. So it is يعني یک tube يكي ام tube لشي دروز بو ليك layer لشي دروز بو لا single epithelium يعني epithelium يكي دروز بو. Okay. So and it has let us say different parts. The first part of the renal tubule is called the proximal convoluted tubule. يعني أم بشي سروا لدواي renal corpuscle أم بشا ني PO3 proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal ني the first part. Then convoluted, it means it has a, let us say, coiled structure. Okay, so it is proximal convoluted tubule. Then what we have the loop of Hindley. This structure is called the loop of Hindley. ما لازم يكون بيته loopy Hindley. كشيء which is a U-shaped tube. It has a U-shaped structure consisting of a thin descending limb. This is thin, okay? If you compare between this part and this part, this one is thinner in compared to this part, okay, of the Henle loop. So it is made of a thin descending limb, thin descending limb. Then what we have again, thin ascending limb and thick ascending limb. So we have thin descending, thin ascending limb and thick ascending limb of the Hindley. Okay. So then what we have, this part also is called the distal convoluted tubule. Distal is the lower part according to the nomenclature. The last part is called distal. Again, convoluted, it means it has a correlate structure. So distal convoluted tubule. And then what we have the collecting ducts. So several tubules or renal tubules came together or combined to form what? To form the collecting duct of the kidney. Here what we have the renal corpuscle, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, and collecting ducts, okay, or renal collecting ducts. And the loop of the Henle made of different parts or sections. The first part is called the thin descending limb, thin ascending limb, and thick ascending limb of the Henle. وأما أو بارتي كوتمان بروسيسي تشيرتيار ودا بروسيسي urine formation يعني is the process of urine formation. We'll explain this later. Is passing through three main processes. The first one is the filtration, then reabsorption in somewhere here, and then what we have the secretion. So from the capillaries, some chemical agent or some substances can be secreted into the filtrate and then eliminated with the urine. Okay. Now I'm trying to explain the process of urine formation. So the process of urine formation is a sequential event and passing through different processes. Started from the filtration. Then what we have two additional processes which are called the tubular absorption and tubular excretion. So the process of urine formation is passing through three main steps. The first one is the globular filtration. Then we have the process of renal tubular reabsorption and tubular excretion. So the first, I'm trying to explain the first step of in the process of urine formation. يعني process بزبوني urine بس قناعة تي أفرق كمان بريتيل globular filtration blood رؤدا دواء وشي معناه tubular reabsorption يعني reabsorption of water and other required materials back into the circulatory system. ولي أحشي ماديكي ضروري بيتها بيوز بغو أو لقال أول شيء قررته بنا circulatory system ودو هم سهم بريتيلش ل tubular excretion. So in the process of excretion شيلو أدات هل ماديكي زين بخش بك نتواني filtration يبغى بكري لرجع excretion وكيت ناو filtrate وكيت ناو urine ولا رجع kidney وكيت دروي لاش. So the globular filtration, it is a process in which water and some solutes in the blood plasma pass from the capillaries of the glomerulus into the capsular space of the nephron. The process that زوربي توا وكان لقال لناو بلازما لقال ووتر أو توا وكاني ناو بلازما فلتريشن بو أكريد لرجعي globular capillary و بۆ کوێ بۆ ناو بۆمانس کەپسول بۆ ئەو کەپسولەی کە بە دەوری globular capillary هەیە کە باسماکە لە renal corpuscle ئەم پرۆسێسە ڕۆ ئەدات. So the permission of solutes through the globular capillaries depend on two main factors. The first one is the solute size, and the second one is the solute charge. يعني filtration هر molecule لناو ل ومانس كبسول لسر اعتمادي لسر شيء هي ل حجمي أو تواوي كهتا أو مادي كلناو بلازما هتا لناو بلاتتا لقال تشارجي يقال يعني تشارجي أو مادي كهتا طبعا يو أزان مثلا التشارج يقول من أو آيوني كهمان بقولنا positive يعني negative charge. Okay, so molecules with a molecular weight less than 6 kilodalton or kg can be filtered freely. يعني هر molecule ويتكي molecular ويتكي شي بيت كم تربيت لشش kd can be filtered freely. يعني بأساني أتواني شي بكت filtrationي بو بكت و pass ببناو شي بناو capillary كا. However, the molecules with a molecular weight more than 70 kilodalton are impermeable. So it means when you have like a large molecule such as a protein or the, let us say, other molecules, so because of their large size, because of their molecular weight, because of having like a molecular weight which is higher or greater than 70 kd, so it cannot be filtered, يعني such as the plasma proteins, albumin or the other proteins. Okay, يعني هر molecule كتبوا ك لحفتها كيلو دالتون ويتكي شي بو زورتر بو أو كاتب أساني filtrationي بو ناكي ناتواني باس ببناو كاكتي بدكا ولا ناو بلاد أمينية توا وكو شي معنى وكو بروتين كان طبعا ما advantage خوية يعني هذا let us say a very great advantage in the process of information. Okay, يعني سودي هي أقروانا بوايا we might lost most of the blood proteins or molecules in the process of filtration. So أني أقر processi أم حجم نبوه حجم جودان نبوه بعساني filtration نبوه أكيا وإما زوي بروتين كان كدروس معنا كده لرجع filtration ولا دس معنا ده لبلا إما شيء بيتو هر molecule كي كلش معنا هاي بقولنا بتعرفي بروتين كزوج جنبين أقل حفاك كدي زوج تلبو وكاتا filtration نبونا. So the solute charge, the second factor which has an influence in the process of filtration is called the solute, is depending on the solute charge. So negatively charged solutes are less likely to be filtered than the neutral or positively charged molecule. As you know, I think we already mentioned this. We said the renal or the nephron is made of cells. So and you know the cell membrane is made of what? Of phospholipids, and the phospholipids normally has or have the, let us say, a negative charge. Okay, so that's why when you have like a negatively charged molecule in the blood, and when it is trying to pass through the capillary beds, which is made of a phospholipid, and it has a negative charge, so the molecule is repelled from the membrane. يعني يوكو چون تدوم مغناطيس هيك بولنا جمسري باكوليك نزيكي تو پال بيتيو دكي دوره كونوا يا باشوري بيكوني زيبكيتوا هسكي repel يكتي يعني بالي بيوني ودوري اخاتوا امش بهمان شيء يعني بون منا molecule كتيه كنيجاتيف تشارج هي بو سيل ممبرين خو نيجاتيف تشارج كنيجاتيف ونيجاتيف ليك نزيكو بال بيتيو دوري اخاتوا لبرو بأساني filtration بو negatively charged ناكري بلام the other molecules including the neutral and positively charged molecules, as you know, when you have a negative and positive charge, so they are attracting each other. يعني وكو لكراكشن هر molecule positive يعني neutral به cell membrane capillary كان يشين negative إنه كتب أساني رأي كشر وبأساني شيكت filtration يعني بو أكيتو بشرطية molecule ويتكان شي بيت كم تربيت لشش KD أو كاتا أتواني شيكت filtration لبال أما يعني we said the negatively charged molecules are less likely to be filtered يعني زور بزوري filtration ولا بلا بلا مش عندك negative charge باسي ام validation كان وهني كان هر filtration بو أكيد بلام less likely يعني بكمي شيء بيت أم حالته رؤته. Then the second process in the process of urine formation is the tubular reabsorption. We just mentioned the process of globular filtration. Now I'm talking about the second process in the process of urine formation, which is called the tubular reabsorption. It is the process of reclaiming, look, reclaiming of water and solutes. If you have a look here, what you have solutes from the tubular fluid and returning them to the blood. What we have sodium, chloride, bicarbonate, potassium, and water, glucose, amino acid, and the other molecules can be reclaimed back from the filtrate into the circulatory system. يعني process reabsorption أو كلا هل مادك filtration بو كرابيت ولش بيوسي في هبه لرجي reabsorption ودوباره لناو renal tubule لأيدوا يعني لدواي أم بشر لم بشرنا شي بو أكريت دوباره reabsorption بو أكريت و أجريت بو ناو شي بو ناو circulatory system. كاتا أما شي يعني renal tubular reabsorption is the reclaiming of what of any returning or reabsorption of what of the water H2O and the solutes يعني 12 can back into the circulatory system. Then what we have, so this term is the isosmotic. So normally when there is a tight coupling between the sodium and water reabsorption, when sodium is reabsorbed directly, water is moving to the site where you have, let us say, high level of sodium. And this process is called isosmotic. يعني هيك هذيك solute كان reabsorption بو بكره بدأ sodium كاتا water كما بيتولو ساتيك أمان بويجون مع water محاولة كابتشي بو ساتيك solute كانت يعني أما في isosmotic يعني بيكواني coupling هي لبيني أمدو process. And the third and last process or part in the process of urine formation is the tubular excretion. If you have a look here, this is the excretion of some chemicals from the circulatory system into the renal tubules. يعني بونا tubula excretion كي now blood دوا أكيد now tubula كوا هني مع ده هي كناتون filtration يبغى بكرة هذا excretion أو إفرازة. So the tubular excretion أما tubular excretion to the tubular space. It is a process in which the renal tubule extracts chemicals from the capillary blood and from the capillaries somewhere here and excrete them into the tubular fluid, so into the filter. Okay, and from the it is opposite to that of the reabsorption. Reabsorption claiming back the filtrate or the solutes and water into the circulatory system, but excretion from the circulatory, from the blood vessels of the circulatory system back into the renal tubule. Okay, so the process of excretions has two main advantages. The first one is the waste removal. Some chemical agents might not be filtered because of their size and because of their charges. So through the process of excretion, they can be excreted into where? Into the renal tubules. And then also it has a, let us say, a major role in the process of acid-base balance. Acid-base balance, so regulation between the hydrogen and let us what you call it the and the OH, hydrogen and the OH within the kidney. Okay, and as you know, the process of acid-base balance is a complex process, and it can be managed through the kidneys and the respiratory system. Okay. So urine volume. So an average adult produces about, let us say, 1 to 2 liter of urine per day. I think we mentioned this in the previous slide. Okay. نکات حجم urine که در روز سویه تقریبا 1 با 2 لیتر لکسکی أسعد. Okay. So we have some clinical conditions which are related to what to the or can be diagnosed based on what on the volume of the urine output. So the first condition is called what is called diuresis or polyuria. Diuresis and polyuria is an increase in the urine output to more than 2 liters. And we said a normal person has about 1 to 2 liters. So when a person has more than 2 liters of urine per day, so this is called what called diuresis or polyuria. Okay, poly many, you know this, polyuria. Okay, so if you have a look at this caricature, you can see directly said, see this person is trying to get to the valve. Okay, just to release himself. Okay. So what are the main causes of polyuria? The first cause of the polyuria is an increase in the volume of fluid intake. So when you have an excessive water or water intake, or let us say juice or other, let us say liquids, so this lead to what? Lead to an increase in the volume of what? Of the urine output. So this is a physiological and normal condition, and it is not considered as a, let us say, a clinical condition. Just is depending on what? On the volume of the fluid intake. Category أوزور خوي توش expect كي كشيت يا أو خوانني ك وتريان زورت يا أي خوي to expect كي كشيت كي يونيشن تشيبر لvolume لدو لتر كشيبر زيادة. And the second factor might be related to some drugs and some treatments, such as furosemide, which is a diuretic agent. يعني furosemide أما مادة كدرمانة كبكاري يبقى كسانة كبتايبتيشيان هي who has it can be used as a treatment for, let us say, the patients who has a cardiovascular defects, congenital, let us say, congestive heart failure, or the other types of heart failure. So when a person is taking this drug, we expect an increase in what? In the urine output. يعني احنا كشيء هيك renal stony هي يعني healthy tree هي شيء بوكي أم agenti كول أجري كولي جلو كتير urine output شيء كاد ديسانزك. So the an increase in the volume of the urine output in this case is depending on what? On the let us say on the effect of this drug. Okay, and the third factor which might lead to diuresis or polyuria is they are related to what? To the chronic diseases such as diabetes. So we have different types of diabetes. The first one is called diabetes mellitus. You know, we have two types of diabetes diabetic mellitus. We have type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. I think we already mentioned this. Okay, and the second type of the diabetic is called the gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes, this type of the diabetes is related to the pregnancy, especially in those patients who has a family history of diabetes and their body mass index is above 225. And this condition is mainly happen in the, let us say, in the pregnant women who has, as we mentioned before, who has, let us say, any the family history of diabetes. يعني أو كسانی که بدی ماس إندكس كان لسر بستوبيان جوایو family history خاصة بقى بسي ودوا family history يعني خزانة كان يعني كسنزي كان يعني بول مدايك باو كشك كان يعني كان هي شكريان هبو بيشتر وزور جار أبيته هو وتهبتي لكتش حاضر تقريبا الدواي بينزمان بوششمان زور بواز ممكن لسريان دربكي برام كنا خور كمنالكي بو chances زوري هي تشاك بيت وهني كسيان reversible and this condition is a reversible condition or sometimes it might persist after the parturition. يعني هني جار بردوام به هني جار هي بزوري نامن يعني حالة اللي بوني منالكا بلام هني حالة يعني من تو طبعا حالة زور بحوثيك على بريوندي با ليفلي كورتيزول وهي بيتامي كاتي خوي باس كورتيزول معناها كذي بيوتمان كورتيزول زور جار ابيته هو اوي كا نيلت جلوكوز ميتابوليزم رو بدا شوري بروتين زور بكاين بوسشار انرجي و كاتي كورتيزول لدشي افدك برزبيته او كاتا شكل زور اكيوليشن بيت و ابحاته دروسك. And the third type of diabetes is called diabetes or diabetic insipidus. We will explain this when we get to the antidiuretic hormone function. Then what we have another type of diabetic, just call it renal diabetes. So the renal diabetes is a specific type of diabetes, and this type of diabetes is related to what? To the glucose canals within the kidney. يعني أو دكتاني أو يتساوي ترانسبورتراني كشيء جزء كشجر لكن هنا حالتي كوي أم ترانسبورتراني نية بو قاسنا والشجر كاتنا في أبتيك الشجر كاتا ولا يورين كني تواني أبتيك الشجر كاتا ولا يورين بهوي نبوني كنالا كاني شجر أبتيكوا أو كاتا أوزمولاريتي يورين بهوي الشكل وزورة به وبركي الزور أو لناو يورينا بهوي أوزمولاريتي وأمينينوا كما يوا أو كاتا فوليوم يورين شيء زيادة. Okay. The second type of renal or urine-related disorders is called oliguria. Oliguria, it is a reduction in the urine output to less than 500 ml per day. يعني half a liter per day. يعني أو كسر تقريبا ل 500 يعني نيو لتر ل 500 مل الرجع كامل هي كم تبدو بو أستا. And this third type of renal related disorder is called anuria. Okay, and you know, no, or very, let us say, little amount. Okay, so it is a clinical condition, anuria, which is characterized by reduction in the urine volume to less than 100 ml per day. So in the case of anuria, the patient has, let us say, a tiny amount or a very small amount of urine output. It is normally less than 100 ml. Okay, يعني كان تلا 100 سي سي يعني لا 0.1 لتر. Okay, 0.1 لتر لشيكات لا يورينكا per day per 24 4 hours. And if you have a look at this cartoon, you can directly see the defect. He's trying to have only few drops of urine. Okay, so low urine output might be related to some defects or some physiological factor. The first one is the renal disease. So some types of the renal disease might reduce the urine output to less than 500 or 100, let us say, ml per day. The second factor, which is a physiological factor, is related to the dehydration. So, as you know, dehydration has has several causes, such as diarrhea, vomiting, burn, and the other causes. يعني هۆکاری زۆرە بۆ dehydration بەهۆی thirstەوە هەبێ بەهۆی چینەتیەوە ڕۆدات or reduction in the water intake و هەنی حاڵەتی تر هەمانە کە بەهۆی ممکنە بەهۆی چوێ ڕوودا بەهۆی دایریا یان ڕەشانەوە یا هەر یا سووتان بڕێکی زۆر لە ئاو ممکنە لە دەست بە ئەو کەسە و the third cause of reduction in the urine output might be related to the circulatory shock. So the circulatory shock is a specific type of shock where the patient is suffering from a systemic vasodilatation. يعني خوێنی خاوە بنەوە و تووشی چێ بێتەوە ئەوەی کە hydrostatic pressure کە باسمان کردێتەوە بۆی process filtration کەمە ڕوویدا filtration باشی ڕوونادا ئەو کاتە urination کەمە بێتەوە. And the last cause of the reduction in the urine output might be related to what prostate enlargement. Okay, and I think I'm quite sure you heard quite a lot about the prostate gland, and the prostate enlargement might be related to what mostly is related to some specific type of cancer. It's called prostate cancer. Okay. So if urine output drops to less than 400 ml per day, the body cannot maintain a safe low concentration of wastes in the blood plasma. So as you know, most of the waste product which is produced by the body's cells can be eliminated through the kidneys when there is a reduction in the urine output. So we expected low rate of waste elimination. يعني رزقاربون لو يصير كم كاكاين output كده. This lead to a specific type of a specific condition which is known as azotemia. Azotemia is mainly, this term is mainly used to define the conditions in which the level of nitrogen based molecules are increasing. يعني اگر urine output کمی کرد با 400 میل و کات زوبی او وستی کلش من دوسه به اما زوبی لدگه کدنی ولا دست کن دروا و لیور رولی سرچیه بس کدنی یکی ارگان سرچیه کان له مجاله و کاتبه تو لیفلی وستن او لشازوره به بتایبتی او مادانی که نایتروژن ل پکات کانه هيا و بده هو حاطه في ازوتيميا امش ممكن بته هو بورانه و دواء و حالات بته هو بورانه و بته هو كوما و كتشاسن که ممكن it might be fatal لو تشي كشنده. So the hormones which are responsible for the regulation of the blood pressure, the first one is called the Renin-Angiotensin system. Renin-Angiotensin system. So the in response to reduced blood pressure, so due to, let us say, reduction in the blood volume due to the bleeding or the other dehydration or vomiting or other any factor which might decrease the blood volume, and blood pressure. So when there is a hypotension, reduction in the blood pressure, the juxtaglomerular cells, the cells we just mentioned it in the previous slide, secrete an enzyme which is called renin. They secrete what? They secrete this enzyme into the blood. Renin stimulates the conversion of what? Of angiotensinogen into what? Into angiotensin 1, and angiotensin converting enzyme, this is a specific enzyme, can convert the angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. So the angiotensin 2 is the functional enzyme. So it is the active form of the angiotensin, and it can regulate or repair the reduced blood volume or blood pressure through two main pathways. The first one is through the induction of vasoconstriction, systemic vasoconstriction. When you have a vasoconstriction, so it means the blood pressure might return back into its normal situation, or the hypotension can be returned back into its normal phase. Okay, so and this second pathway which angiotensin 2 can act through is through stimulation of aldosterone secretion. We will explain the impact of aldosterone later. So aldosterone increases water and sodium retention, so they increase the reabsorption of sodium and water back into the circulatory system. And when you have an increased, let us say, reabsorption of water and sodium back into the circulatory system, so this leads to what? Due to an increase in the amount of the blood and the reduced blood volume, and hypotension can be returned back into its normal situation. يعني aldosterone and angiotensin بهوي الرنينو أجوزيتو كيبا angiotensin 1 angiotensin converting enzyme كابا angiotensin 2 angiotensin لدور رجوا إيشكا يعني vasoconstriction رغاني كرجبوني مولولكاني خوينة كابو أوي أو كمثل blood هي pressure كي بس كاتو نيل hypotension كاربو بدا ودو هم يعني الرجاي stimulation aldosterone secretion كات والdosterone شيء كات هانی گوشیلەکاندا بۆ ئەوەی کە ئاو سۆدیۆم وەربگرنەوە بۆ ناو بیگەڕنەوە ڕێبزۆرشتنی بۆکەن بۆ ناو بڵەت و بەم شێوەیەش کە ئاو لەگەڵ سۆدیۆم کەنتی زۆر گەڕایە بۆ ناو بڵەت ئەو کاتە ئینکریسی بڵەت پرێشەرەکە یان بڵەت ڤۆلیۆمەکە ئەگرێتەوە سەر باری ئاسان. ئەمە یەکەم هۆرمۆن کە renin-angiotensin. So hormones that influence the reabsorption of water. So we have different types of hormones, and each hormone has its own specific strategy to repair or return or induce the secretion or induce the absorption of water and sodium back into the circulatory system. The first hormone is the aldosterone. Okay, aldosterone, we just mentioned this. We said angiotensin 2 can act through aldosterone, one of the pathways of the angiotensin. So aldosterone, it is secreted by what? By the adrenal cortex in response to what? To a high blood potassium level, reduced blood sodium level, and reduced blood pressure. So when you have, let us say, less sodium, it means what? Reduction in blood pressure. Also, high level of potassium can also lead to what? Lead to the reduction in the blood pressure, and it can be blood pressure hypertension. And this, an increase in the level of potassium, reduction in the level of sodium, and blood pressure lead to what? Lead to the release of the aldosterone from where? From the adrenal cortex, okay, from the adrenal gland. And Aldosterone, what is when we have, let's say, high level of aldosterone in the blood, aldosterone stimulated the reabsorption of sodium ion, and when there is an increase in the level of sodium uptake or returning reabsorption of sodium into this circulatory system, so if you remember what we said there is a tight coupling between the sodium reabsorption and water. So when sodium ion is reabsorbed, so directly through the process of osmosis, water can move in to the circulatory system again, and this lead to what? Lead to the reduction uh, of the urine volume and increasing the blood volume. Okay, so this help maintain normal blood volume and blood pressure. مشروع كاد أو كذا hypotension توجهه زختي دعبزة blood volume كم بوتو لرجع reabsorption صوديوم وتروا حالته check. The second hormone is called arterial natriuretic peptide. Arteria, it means what? The hormone is related to the atria of the heart. You know what we have within the heart? We have the atria, and ventricles. Okay, or right and left atrium, and right and left ventricle. Okay, so the arterial natriuretic peptide is excreted from where? From the atrium of the heart, in response to what? Look, in response to high blood pressure. يعني كاتك زخ الزولة بي كهارد فشاي زولة كده سري pressure زيادة كدوه it release a hormone which is called arterial natriuretic peptide, and the arterial natriuretic peptide enter into the circulatory system and gets into the kidneys, and within the kidney at the tubular sites, they induce what? They induce or they stimulate a reduction in what? In the sodium ion reabsorption by the kidneys when the excretion of or excretion of the sodium, let's say, or when the reabsorption of the sodium ion is reduced by the kidney, so it means the sodium retained within the filtrate. When the sodium retained within the filtrate, so the water cannot be reabsorbed back into the blood, and this lead to what? Lead to the excretion of water and lowering the blood volume and blood pressure. When you have, let us say, an increase in the urine output, يعني كميز كدن زورة بيه معناه ويا blood volume چی بتو كم كات وكاتا pressure زورة كات چی بتو كم بيه. This is the hormone which we mentioned it during our lectures when we talked about the water reabsorption, which is called the antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone, I think we mentioned this hormone when we had our lecture about the endocrine system. We said the antidiuretic hormone is released from the posterior part of the pituitary gland, the posterior part of the pituitary gland, the phrase in response to what? To reduced volume of water in the blood and hypotension. So the reduced level of water in the blood, it means what? An increase in the osmolarity of the blood. يعني osmolarity blood check زيادة كا. كاتك زيادة كده أو كاتا we have some specific receptors which are called the osmoreceptors. يعني receptor كمسؤول بو detection change sensor مسؤول detection وران لأوزمولاريتي بلد داروبتا كاتك آوي لبلد كم بويا معناه واي أوزمولاريتي زيادة كا. So they induce the osmoreceptors which are scattered throughout the brain and some parts of the cardiovascular system. هني بشي cardiovascular system ولا عندك party brain هاي كأوزمولاريتي بلد يعني أو كم بويا لنا بلد أمانة حساس sensation كان في إنسان وأبيته هو شيء إفراز antidiuretic hormone. خود روزبوني antidiuretic hormone لكي from the hypothalamus and then through the hypothalamus through the neurons we said the posterior part of the pituitary gland is a direct extension of the hypothalamus. So they can send it to the through the axon of the neurons to the posterior part of the pituitary gland, and from posterior part of the pituitary gland can be excreted into where? Into the circulatory system. The antidiuretic hormone get into the kidney through the blood, and they induce, if you remember, the water reabsorption from the collecting ducts and distal convoluted tubule, mainly in the collecting ducts. The 19% of the water is reabsorbed here, if you remember. So the water can be reabsorbed through some specific canals which are called aquaporin. So the water can be claimed back into the circulatory system when there is an increase in the water reabsorption. So it means what? It means retaining back of the blood pressure and blood volume into its normal level or normal situation. Okay. يعني antidiuretic hormone إشكال تقوم أم بمدي absorption وتد بهوي antidiuretic hormone بمدي بالصوديوم والنية ليلة تنها antidiuretic hormone كباندين كلا posterior فازك في بنا blood أجاتك كنية كان لcollecting دكت شيء بانديني antidiuretic hormone لقر receptor antidiuretic hormone receptor هي خوي كلا endothelial collecting دكت هيا وأكاتشيب كان بهوي سايكليك دينيوسين مونوفوسفيت وكزول من بحسب ديتيلا كتان بندي شكل انسيرتي اكوابولين كانالا بوناو تشي بوناو رينال تيوبولا كان وابيته هوي ريابزورشني واتر دايركتلي بوكي بو لناو فلتريتكوا لناو او فلتريتيك لناو تيوبولا كهي باك بوناو بوكي بوناو بلاد وكانت يزور او ريابزورشني بو اكيبم شي وابيته هوي تشي ابيته هوي كا blood pressure or blood volume بقاعد يصير حالتي أساعي